Hello everyone, my name is Marianne Guevara, and on this channel we talk about books, movies, and more. A huge hello to anyone who is newly subscribed, and a huge thank you to anyone who is returning. Since we are approaching the end of the year, I thought I'd put out my favorite books of 2023 video. And I'm going to start off this video actually with a couple of honorable mentions, and then after that we're going to move on to my official favorite books. So we got a good mixture. We got some horror, classic, fantasy. Some of these books you would definitely have seen like in my mid-year, freak out book tag. Some I've talked about in recent videos, but since there's quite a bit, let's just dive in. So for the first honorable mention, we have The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. This is an epic high fantasy that takes place in an Asian-inspired setting. And although I called it, a fantasy just now, to me, it kind of just felt like a mythology, reading a mythology, just because the world feels so immense and the lore is just so rich. The story follows two men who are on this pilgrimage shepherding this goddess across the land, helping her escape her terror sons who have this tyrannical grip over the land. I was incredibly impressed with this book, especially technically. With regards to its prose, to its structure, this is a book that makes use of the first, second, and third voice all at the same time. And naturally you would think, well, that sounds confusing, and I definitely see that it can be. It definitely sets a particular unusual rhythm to the whole story, but I feel like the more you read it, the more you just become accustomed to it, and you kind of learn how to dance along to the rhythm that the book is setting. And not only that, I just really like the themes of the book itself, particularly that of storytelling. And I feel like, the structure, the use of the three voices really add, to the theme of storytelling. And I have seen, people who have read this book and, they have nothing but praise for it. However, I feel that not a lot of people or not enough people have read it. And so I'm including it in the honorable mentions because I do want to see more people read The Spear Cuts Through Water. It's definitely deserved. And not to mention, it's a standalone, which I really enjoy. We get a lot of series in fantasy, but not enough standalones. So yeah, The Spear Cuts Through Water, please check it out. For the next honorable mention, we have The Shadow over Innsmouth. This is a manga adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's novella, The Shadow over Innsmouth. This is done by Go Tanabe, and I'm a huge fan of Tanabe's, Lovecraft adaptations, particularly because of the artwork. I think when it comes to Lovecraft adaptations, Tanabe's art style is perfect for it. I think that a cartoony, highly stylized art style won't do justice to Lovecraft storytelling, but Tanabe's hyper-realistic, highly detailed art style does. I think it really highlights, the grotesque, unnerving, absurd horror that is found in Lovecraft's work. And yeah, The Shadow of Innsmouth was great. This is my favorite adaptation of his that I've read. Obviously, there's more to come, but out of all the ones that I've read in English, this is my favorite. For those who don't know, this is about a man who is taking a journey throughout New England, but finds himself having to spend a night in the town of Innsmouth, which the neighboring villages kind of shun due to its unsavory reputation, the town itself and its inhabitants. And I'm just going to show you some of the artwork in here because you just gotta check it. It is stunning. So here is some of the gorgeous, terrifying, detailed artwork found in this book. If you're a fan of Lovecraft, if you're a fan of Shadow over Innsmouth, I definitely recommend trying this out, experiencing the story in a different medium. This isn't even my favorite Lovecraft, short story, but I enjoyed my time going through this manga. So yeah, Shadow over Innsmouth. Then we have The Horned God, Tales of the Great God Pan. So this is a short story collection, all themed around the figure of Pan. And what I really loved about this collection is just how varied the interpretation of Pan was. So you had some who interpreted him as demonic, and then others, he was more of a wily, mysterious trickster, and then some viewed him as a symbol against repression. And yeah, I just really like how varied the interpretations were, and it allowed for a lot of creativity. So this is not only short stories, but poems. And some of my favorite ones were, of course, The Great God Pan by Arthur Machen. But there are some really cool new ones, like Pan by George Edgerton, that I really enjoyed. If you want to check out the British Library Tales of the Weird, I would recommend this collection. So now we move on to my official favorite books of 2023. And of course, we're starting off with Senlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft. This is the first book in the Books of Babel series, one of my favorite series of all time. I have dedicated an entire video to this series, me recommending it, me gushing over it. So if you want to know more, please check out that video. But if you're into a series, or if you're interested in a series with a incredibly unique fantasy world, if you're into characters that are fully fleshed, that have, strengths, weaknesses, vulnerabilities, if you're into beautiful prose, if you like the exploration of societal themes, definitely check out this series and check out Senlin Ascends. I definitely recommend it. Next we have Till We Have Faces by C.S. Lewis. This is a retelling of the myth of Cupid and Psyche, but through the perspective of one of Psyche's sisters, the disfigured Oriel. But in this version of the story, Oriel loves Psyche. She loves her to a fault, and she's heartbroken when Psyche has to be given away to this god. This is a story about selfishness disguised as love. This is a story of man's frustration at not being able to comprehend life's mysteries. This is also about, a very flawed but human character who, growing up was never properly loved and therefore never learned how to properly love someone in return. And you see later in her life, she attempts to redeem herself, and in doing so, finally learns how to love properly. And it's such a beautiful story, a beautiful tale. And if you're into myth retellings, I would recommend checking this one out. Next, we have The Woodlanders by Thomas Hardy. Similar to Till We Have Faces, this made an appearance in my mid-year Freak Out book tag. This once again takes place in Thomas Hardy's Wessex in Blackmore Vale, and we're basically following a love square. These four individuals, and this story really follows or really explores the themes of marital choice, of class mobility, and then the ensuing consequences of all of that. And what I really enjoyed about this Hardy is that I think out of all the ones that I've read from him so far, this is the most psychological. Compared to like Far From the Madding Crowd, Tess of the D'Urbervilles, Mayor of Casterbridge, this one doesn't have that many melodramatic events. This is very much an introspective novel. The Woodlanders delves more into the psychology of each of the four characters, examining their personalities, seeing how these personalities and their individual life experiences, along with the given moment that each of these characters are in, what choices they make, and then the subsequent consequences of those choices, oftentimes that are not good. Yeah, it's definitely one of the more psychological, introspective Hardys that I've read, and I'm really into books like that, so this is definitely another favorite of mine. So yeah, if you're into a Hardy that's like that, if you're not so much into a lot of melodrama, I would recommend The Woodlanders. Next, we have The Lady's Paradise by Emile Zola, another book you might have seen from my mid-year Freak Out book tag. This one follows or chronicles the emergence of the modern-day department store in Paris and seeing how it affects the lives directly and indirectly involved in its construction, in its sort of like birth. And it does delve into the nitty-gritty, the intricacies of running a department store like this. And it's very much a book that examines sort of like this hyper-consumerist environment. And initially, that kind of premise doesn't really appeal to me, but I found myself very much engrossed in this book. And I think a lot of that is due to sort of like the main narrative story thread that we have here, in which we have a woman named Denise Baudu who arrives in Paris, trying to find work to support her and her brothers. And she ends up working for the Lady's Paradise. And it's such a cutthroat, ruthless environment. And she ends up sort of like catching the eye of the owner of the establishment. And he has a reputation of kind of, being a womanizer. And despite his attentions, despite basically trying to buy her, she refuses to be commodified. So I really enjoyed that main narrative, thread. But then I also found it fascinating seeing all the various details that kind of just went into, the running of this department store, and just seeing how this environment, this book in a way felt modern, because I felt like there were a lot of things in here that you can think about or see still going on in the modern day. So I would recommend you try out The Lady's Paradise. You might be surprised like I was. Lastly, for my favorite books of 2023, we have No Name by Wilkie Collins. And this was my Victober read for the month of October. And this book deals with a topic that I haven't really come across before or a lot in classics, or at least Victorian lit, and that is illegitimacy. In this story, we're following Nora and Magdalene Vanstone, who discover that, upon the untimely deaths of their parents, that they are illegitimate. And, therefore they are declared nobody's children. They're basically social pariah. They're casted out of the only home they ever knew, and they're basically left to fend for themselves. Now, Nora decides to shoulder this burden and find work. Magdalene decides that she's going to do whatever it takes to get her inheritance back. And this was just a treat. This is my third Wilkie Collins, and I have to say, of the 3 novels that I've read, they've all been like 500 plus pages, but they never felt like slogs. I never felt like the plot was meandering. I never felt that, we were going off tangent. I was just enthralled. The pacing was so good. And a lot of it also, I enjoyed the characters as well. I was very invested in the characters, especially Magdalene Vanstone, who is pretty much our main character. She is basically morally in the wrong, technically. However, Collins presents her with he writes her with such empathy and understanding. And he really goes into like the moral conflict she is dealing with in her heart. And you come to understand that, she's not a bad, horrible person. And you understand like through her situation and through her temper, her personality, what is driving her to do what she is doing. You got characters that are presented as, scoundrels, but there's something about them that's endearing, that you kind of root for them. And then you have characters that are technically victims, but, their flaws are pointed out, and you're kind of just rooting for them to get tricked. I don't know. This was just highly, highly entertaining, and I just really liked the character work in this book. I think Collins did a fantastic job with his character work. He's definitely become one of my favorite Victorian authors, and if you haven't tried out Collins, you definitely should. You should definitely check out No Name as well, because it's definitely one of his more underrated books. So those were all the honorable mentions and my favorite books of 2023. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please let me know down in the comments, what were your favorite books of the year? I'm very much looking forward to what 2024 has in store for me when it comes to reading. And until then, I'll check you out next time. Please like and subscribe if you want to do so, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!